Well, hello and welcome to MCR Accounting Quick Tips. I believe I'm going to start a series talking about GST issues. I'm going to try to keep these short and to the point. And one of the things I want to do before I forget, right off top, I want to thank these guys at Video Tax News because honestly, sometimes I'm not sure how people like us would even keep up with what's going on out there if it wasn't for them. Anyway, we're going to start this series off talking about supplied subcontractors and how GST pertains to that, because there's been some court cases of late, and what's coming out of them might take some contractors and some contractors by surprise. So we have a case up here that was called out to us by Video Tax News, and this is the case that I'm basing today's commentary on. So in this case, the supply we're talking about was fuel and maintenance for a fleet of trucks that the company did own, but they contracted drivers for them, and the contract between the company and the drivers was such that the drivers were accountable for maintenance and fuel and whatnot on the truck, although they did not own the truck. So that's the first thing to understand. And then the next thing to understand is the company had an arrangement with fuel supply so that those drivers then all had credit cards which they used for fuel and maintenance in these trucks, on the arrangement that would be paid back as their invoices were paid out, so clawed back off their invoices, so to speak. And the issue that comes up between, well, really there's three parties involved. There's the company, there's the CRA, and there are the subcontractors. Now in this case, we're not talking about one subcontractor because every single driver was a subcontractor to this company. Nonetheless, what comes out of this case is going to be applied to supplied subcontractors in general. And I kind of like that Video Tax News put this case forward because it's about fuel. And if there was going to be a loophole here, it might have been with fuel. So there's neither, are you going to say, I'm going to be a little bit of a spoiler alert, neither party wins this case to their satisfaction. So that's another reason why I like this case. The judge did not side with the CRA, and he also likewise did not side with the company or the subcontractors. So let's just talk through what he did decide. So where this goes is that if you resupply to your subcontractor, then you are the supplier to that contractor, and you should be charging GST on that commodity. Now, the company's argument was we didn't procure a supply of diesel and resupply it to our truck drivers. They purchased diesel at stations that we gave them cards for. So that was the first test, and the judge didn't seem to really go for that, and in fact decided that in this case that is going to be deemed as resupply anyway. And that's important because everything about how your case will go revolves around that, whether this supply that you're being supplied is considered to be a resupply, meaning that the primary contractor purchased it and then is resupplying it to you. So in this case, the trucking company felt, since they had never handled the fuel themselves ever, that the truckers personally put this fuel in their trucks at the stations, that couldn't really be considered resupply. The court decided they were wrong in that, and decided in favor of CRA that was in fact resupply. But that led to a bunch of other questions. So not all of the fuel And there was maintenance involved in this too. You know, in Canada you can research any of these things yourself. So if you wanted to download this Daville Transport versus Her Majesty a document and read through it yourself to check my interpretations, that would be a good thing for you to do. So not all of the fuel was even purchased in Canada, and not all of the fuel was purchased in the same provinces in Canada. Now, those two things are significant because the company was getting its reimbursement on the fuel based on a per mile charge that they clawed back from the subcontractors' invoices for the total mileage for the trip. And what CRA was then wanting to do was apply Ontario HST tax regime to the entire amount, was what the CRA felt they should be able to do. The court came back and said a couple of things. At first it said any fuel, any maintenance that was purchased in the U.S. certainly did not have GST or HST paid on it, and therefore CRA can't expect to be paid that GST that was never collected in the first place, was never collectible in the first place. The court went one step further than that in this document, and they go on to say that, you know, it may be true that this company's head office was in Ontario, but the trips that these trucks took went all over the U.S. and all over Canada. So CRA does not have the right to arbitrarily decide all the taxes payable in Ontario, the highest possible tax regime. That the court decided in favor of, you know, really I see it as both the contractor and the subcontractor in this case. So that's another thing to keep in mind with this. So when we get down to what does it all mean? Well, there could easily be changes. I expect more court cases on this, is why I say I think this is probably going to be the beginning of a long series. But in general, if you are a contractor and you are supplying your subcontractors, even if it's fuel and even if it's through a fuel card, be aware that there will be GST. That is not tax exempt. I mean, this company felt that all of this fuel and maintenance and everything should be outside tax exempt and GST. So I should have said that at the front. They lost that right off the bat. It's absolutely not. So if you're in that position, GST is going to be owing, but only on products that were purchased in a GST regime. I mean, like, so if you're working across the border, this doesn't apply to things purchased in the U.S. That should be pretty clear to everybody. I don't think that there's going to be that much difficulty understanding that piece of it. You should really, this tax is, so here's the thing about GST, HST. It's supposed to be paid by the final recipient. So they purchase this fuel. It goes to the drivers. The driver is the final recipient of the fuel. So realistically, the driver should see that GST charge on their invoice payout as well. If, on the other hand, you don't flow it through to the end user, it's still going to be owable to the CRA. So that's the gist of where this case went, and I'm expecting that there's going to be a lot more cases. I think particularly in this area, I want to caution if you're working as a welder and you're working fully supplied contracts, be aware that you could become liable for the GST on those supplies. Either you or your primary contractor will be liable for the GST on those supplies, or HST, depending on where in Canada you're working for. So Also then, if you are a company like we were just talking about, and you are doing this supply, and you're passing things back down to your subcontractors, there's going to be more bookkeeping than it would at first appear. So in this case, their flat rate per total mileage charged is going to need to be fine-tuned a little bit, because it has to recognize the actual tax regimes where the fuel was actually purchased, in terms of how they're going to report out to the CRA. It doesn't matter so much between the contractor and the subcontractor. Whatever mileage deal they made is fine, but in terms of how are you going to report it to the CRA? The other side of that, as the court supported, is the CRA can't just arbitrarily decide all of it is taxes owing, and all of it is taxes owing in the highest possible tax regime that we ever seen one of your vehicles drive through. So this is going to hit a lot of people. I'm going to look for some more cases. I'm going to try to get back to you over the next few weeks with a few more of these. I really expect the GST enforcement, that's going to be a no-brainer for the government coming out of this. The collecting on GST is a pretty straightforward thing relative to collecting on income taxes owed. So, you know what? Now's a good time. All of you out there, get your GST reporting in order, right? So that you're not caught on the wrong side of this. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.